Welcome to NFL World, when it first starts and ends. I'm your host, Jacob. And we had a football game this past week. We had the Hall of Fame game. So, first of all, before we get into that, congratulations to all the Hall of Famers who were enshrined this week. Dwight Freeney, Randy Granashaw, Devin Hester. The first actual specialist in the Hall of Fame is Devin Hester. Well deserved. Andre Johnson, the first Texan, the first Houston Texan. Steve Mongo McMichael, who they actually did a very nice thing. They brought his jacket to him. I believe some of his teammates were there. Obviously, his wife was there. And some of the new Hall of Famers went as well. So that was very nice. Julius Peppers and Patrick Willis, who I've shared numerous times, but I will do it again. Patrick Willis, besides Ray Lewis, was probably one of the most dominant linebackers. He just didn't play very long. So congratulations to all of those guys. Now, I was thinking about the Hall of Fame game. Happy Monday to you too, Daniel. I was thinking about the Hall of Fame game and the best thing I came up with was let's do a good, a bad, and a sad. This is not good, bad, and ugly. This is good, bad, and sad. So it's the first edition of the good, bad, and sad Hall of Fame edition. So the good backups look great. The backup quarterbacks looked awesome. Especially as we get here, Brett Rippon and Case Keenum. They looked great, but also Davis Mills looked great. Everyone looked comfortable. Davis Mills went 10 for 13 for 102 yards and a touchdown. Case Keenum was 7 for 9 for 78 yards and a touchdown. Brett Rippon with an astounding 11 of 15 for 166, 3 touchdowns, and that was not expected. Everyone looked really good, looked comfortable as a quarterback. When you're a backup guy, you're playing backup players, guys who they haven't even learned each other's names yet, and you're throwing them the football. That's something that it was awesome to see. And they had Joe Aikman and Troy, or Joe and Troy on. They had Joe Buck and Troy Aikman on the call, so it was very much exciting. It was fun to watch. First half was very clean, no penalties. It was a good first half. The bad. Weather. That's the best way I can put the weather shifted. We got into the third quarter, it started to shift. It was raining, harder for the quarterbacks to complete passes. And you feel for those guys because they had a very difficult opportunity. They had to go and play in the rain. I don't know if you've ever tried to catch a wet football before. That's the hardest thing to do. And with gloves, when the gloves get wet, oh my gosh, it's worse. There's like no friction because when you wear those gloves, there's friction that basically how they test the gloves, they take a block of some kind of metal, they put it and they go right against the glove to see if it's too sticky or not. And what would happen when the glove gets wet, it loses its friction, so it just becomes slippery. So you can't catch, it slides. It's harder to grab. That's why you see a lot of players when it rains, they take their gloves off, they just tape their hands up. So the weather got bad. Um, the best thing I can say, it was bad because the bad part of it was you knew the weather, okay, it was gonna pass over. You're fine with that. It did make the game a little sloppy. There was more flags in the second half, more traditional preseason football with the penalty. So that was the bad. The sad part, in which there's a couple, the weather was sad. It was raining. We were trying to watch a football game for the first time since February, unless you watch the UFL. But we were trying to watch a football game for the first time since February, and for it to rain, it was upsetting. Another sad thing was they had the interviews because when they do the Hall of Fame game, they do the interviews for all the players in the Hall of Fame, and they interview everyone. But they had two interviews where it was in the rain. They basically just created like a tent and allowed this interview, these interviews to continue happening. So it was like, why are we doing that? Just forget the interviews. Seek shelter, because that's what everyone's saying. Seek shelter. Excuse me. And that was, excuse me. They went and continued the interviews, which I did not like. Um, but the other sad part, and it's more sad to me, I'm a traditionalist, when they did the new kickoff rule. The kickoffs, I didn't fully hate. I didn't mind the 12th man where they had him hold the ball and kick it. I didn't mind that. And then him run off the field, didn't hate it. Thought it was actually pretty good. The kickoffs of them running like 20 yards, didn't like it. Move it back. Move it back to each team is on their side of the 50-yard line, and then let them go. That way there's more distance. It did do its job. They got more returns. But just move it from where it is, I believe it's like the 40-yard line, move it to the 50, put both teams on each side of the 50, and then let it go. Creates more room, you have more explosive plays, plus it forces the kick return team and the kick coverage team to cover up 30 yards instead of like 15, 20 yards. That's what I do. But like I said, it did do its job. More returns. I think 7 of 8 were returned. That's very exciting. Just move it just a hair. That's all I want. And they did tweak the because they had called like I think 2 penalties on the kick return or kick coverage teams because the guy leaned and they called the offsides false or whatever they were calling it. They fixed that because it's just not fair. You're gonna call too many penalties on kick return or kick coverage. That's not fair. Just get that out. Let it go. It's not really affecting anything. Let it go. That's what I do. But so minor details for the good, bad, and sad portion of this. Now, moving on into the injury at camp. Hang on. So, excuse me. Puka Nakua suffered a knee injury and is considered week to week. He had his knee in ice. Now, how do we know this? Because the Rams are doing a joint practice right now with, hang on, let me grab it. Actually, the Rams are doing a joint practice this week with the Dallas Cowboys. Puka Injured not being out there is a big deal. He needs to be out there. Now, there is a joint practice going on today, which did lead to a fight, as the Giants and Lions were doing a joint practice today. Typically, you do a joint practice the week of the game, the preseason game. That's typically what you do. Not everyone does a joint practice, but you just want to hit somebody. I'm reading this off CBSSports.com. It says, look, 3 fights break out at Giants-Lions joint practice. Daniel Jones joins the scuffle. It's one of those things of they happen. It's frustrating. The first time you're actually playing somebody and you can't hit them. You play against yourselves, so you're frustrated about that. Now you get to play another team, but you can't really hit them. It's frustrating. These guys are ready to go because they've been practicing for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even just about 10 days, but they've practiced. They want to play. So fights are common. Don't be worried about it. In the league, it's usually a small fine and that's it. Move it on. It's not important. The next thing is the Titans signed another safety. Steelers. I mean, not Steelers. Seahawks safety, excuse me. Seahawks safety. I got the Steelers on my mind. Another Seahawks safety in Quandre Diggs. They signed Jamal Adams. I did not know this. The GM of the Titans was a teammate of Jamal Adams' father. So that's the connection. The Quandre Diggs one, I shouldn't be shocked, but I am. And the reason I'm shocked is because, well, number one, I thought Quandre Diggs, not as good as he was earlier in his career, but still had a really nice year. It's a 1-year deal, $3 million, $2 million in addition for incentives. The 31-year-old Diggs started out his career at the Lions, went to the Seahawks in 2019, became a Pro Bowler. He still had 95 tackles and an interception last year. Played in all games. So, not terrible. Diggs joins the secondary of L'Jarius Sneed, Chidobe Awuzie, and Jamal Adams, his former teammate, now current teammate. So, this Titans team, they're trying to definitely show that we're going to be light years ahead of where we were a year ago. Where a year ago we couldn't do anything on defense, really. Now we're going to be light years ahead of that. And that's really important. And, teams have shown this where you just go bug and bin hunting and you find the player, and that player is a starter or has played starter before. Now he's going to be a rotation guy, or he's going to be a starter here, and he's going to make plays. It's what you do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that's all important. A quick roundup before we get to the final news about Skip Bayless is the Jordan Addison gets 2 charges that he has to face. 3-game suspension is on the docket. So we'll see if he's actually given that. Again, I've said this before. Might be near the end of preseason before we see what the deal is. But he's facing a 3-game suspension. Okay. Um, I'm gonna make sure I get this all right here. Let me make sure I get it. Here we go. I want to make sure I'm getting it. John Gruden made an appearance at Chiefs training camp. It's a little bit on the. Oh, that was interesting. Sorry. Um, the Arizona Cardinals signed Xavier Collins to a 2-year extension. Collins has actually been one of the more productive linebackers in Arizona. Let me make sure I get the number here. The deal is $14 million, and it's 2 years, $14 million, $11.25 million guaranteed at signing. So it's actually a really heavy player deal, but it's also cheaper. They would have owed him about $13.251 million for him to just be on the team as before. So it's not a terrible deal. The Dolphins restructured Tyreek Hill's contract. It was at first worded it was a 3-year contract extension. Not really. They moved money. They restructured $90 million guaranteed, $65 million over the next 3 years. So basically, how this worked was the contract initially, but they moved over to this year, creates the money saying, okay, now the contract's worth $90 million. That's what they did. They just moved it. So it's not a terrible thing. I'm gonna make sure I can find it. I saw it earlier. Let me go to. I don't know if I'll get it, but okay, here we go. Okay, yes, I got it. The Commanders are expected to play Jaden Daniels in the first preseason game just to see how he looks. And as a look, it's actually a pretty good idea to do it. It's just he's the second overall pick. Let's see exactly what is worth for him to do. I will also make note the Cowboys this past week lost Sam Williams to a knee injury. He's out for the year. I don't know if I can pronounce this name right. Hang on. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna hope I pronounce this name right. Aliquid Muhammad signed with the Cowboys, did the whole thing. He signs. Also, Shaka Tony also signed with the Cowboys, who also Shaka Tony was a former teammate of Michael Parsons. Aliquid Muhammad, big athlete. They see what he'll do. Both these guys that were suspended a year ago for various reasons. Muhammad still has, I believe, a 1-game suspension. We'll see what happens. But those were the moves the Cowboys decided to make. Now, I want to do this because this is the final thing. Skip Bayless' final FS1 show was last week. This is the problem with Skip Bayless, and everyone who knows him, watched him for a long time, have said the same things. He's a liar. He's a liar. He got fired, okay, because he was not doing good. His show was down in the ratings. No one cared about what he was saying. When on his show, he had former players who would just basically scoff at whatever he said. He talked for like 3 minutes when the segment would go on for about 10 minutes. So there's no real good differential of time for him. And he said, I resign. No, you got fired because you didn't do good. That's what happens. It's wordplay. It's what Skip Bayless has done for years. He's made fun of. He called himself a Cowboys fan when really he just attacked every Hall of Fame or player coach of the Dallas Cowboys. He attacked Tom Landry's religion. He said Troy Aikman was gay. He said that Mike McCarthy was fat and he couldn't have a fat head coach. These were things that he was just saying. He made fun of Dak Prescott when Dak Prescott was going through his mental health struggles after his brother passed away. These were things that he was making fun of on live television or in a newspaper article or on radio or something he made fun of or wrote down in a book. And when players actually called him on his BS, he would hide. He'd be like, well, that's not what I said technically. That's not 90% of the book. That's not this. That's not that. The Cowboys don't like him. And he would always say, I got sources. No, you don't. No one talks to you. He did the same thing with LeBron. He's done it all the time. He wants to get a rise out of people. That's what he wants. He doesn't care about how he does it. If it's the most accurate thing or the most egregious thing. Whatever it is. Players don't like him. Coaches don't like him. People in the office don't like him. People, and even his workspace don't like it. Charles Barkley has said on numerous occasions that if he knew, he said this on Dan Patrick's show, that if he knew he was going to die and there was nothing he could do, he couldn't even go to jail, he would go and beat up Skip Bayless live on television. That's what he'd do. He said that before. He said that on the Dan Patrick show. Because he hates Skip Bayless that much. For a guy who could be put on television, say the most random things, the most incorrect things, and still make a lot of money, and on top of all that, not have an inkling of truth to it, players don't trust him, players don't want to be around him. You can't make fun of guys like that. It's not how it works. And then you say, well, what about his takes are strong? He created the show, the hot take format, basically. It's a fake take. There's no truth behind it. He doesn't believe in what he says. And now there's everyone who does the same show now, and they're beating him at his own game. They're beating him at his own game. That's what is happening. It's not because he's better. It's not because he's smarter. Because he's a liar. And he lies through his teeth to make money. when people don't want to talk to you, when people don't care what you think, when people ignore you, it's pretty easy to figure out you're as good as gone. For NFL World, I'm Jacob Hubert.